For open discussion. Seeing none, we'll move on to our presentations. Our presentation for today will be City Administration Building Project Update. And
good afternoon.
please.
Suquan Beck-Etten, Director of Central Services. Thank you for allowing us to be here today. We're going to provide you with an update on the City Administrative Office Building Project. And in today's presentation, we're going to show you what it looks like, tell you what the cost will be, discuss how we plan to pay for it, and outline the next steps in the process. I just want to begin by going through where we've been. We've been talking about space needs for quite some time. The first formal space needs study was conducted in 2007, and that addressed short-term solutions, and many of those recommendations were implemented. In 2012, we did another formal study. We addressed 3 to 5 year growth needs, and this study is the one that began to address long-term growth needs of the city. Our 5-year plan included renovating the current City Hall and leasing additional space. So just to go through just a brief recap. In 2013, we moved several smaller departments out of City Hall into leased space, and we did that to accommodate the existing employees in City Hall. And we knew this was a stopgap measure and intended to be a short-term fix. In 2014, we began renovations to City Hall to maximize the space that we have there. The open office concept will serve us well and will be flexible down the road no matter what departments reside there. We completed ground floor renovations first, then we tackled second floor in 2015. And even with those improvements, we still have engineering staff in the basement of City Hall because there's not room for them on second floor. We have made the necessary improvements to City Hall to ensure it remains viable far into the future. In the last 5 years, we have made significant investments to City Hall. We overhauled the boilers, the HVAC system, sprinklers, the elevator. We installed energy efficient lighting, and we tuck pointed the entire building. But there's no space for growth in City Hall, and we have an ongoing need for additional office space. As the city continues to expand, we will need to continue to hire additional staff. So in April of last year, we provided an overview to you of the due diligence we had been completing since 2012, and we brought forth our recommendation to build a new building. This recommendation came after researching numerous options for leased space and for the purchase of a potential existing building. We toured many existing buildings and found each of them to be unsuitable for our long-term growth needs. With your support, we have moved this project forward over the last year. Last September, we provided a project update during an informational meeting, and at that time we laid out plans for next steps, and we anticipated then that we'd come before you first quarter of 2016 with the design and budget. In October of 2015, we came before you with the architect and engineering contract for your approval. In November, we brought forth the construction contract for your approval. And then in December, we came before you with the financial advisory and bond counsel services contract. And that brings us to today. We are right on schedule to present the building design and project budget. We have brought this project forward with the support of Councilors Anderson Jr., Rolfing, and Kiley, who have been part of the advisory team. The advisory team has met 7 times, and in addition, I have had numerous conversations with each of you to keep you apprised of the project's progress and to answer questions and concerns along the way. Just to recap our goals of the project. Number 1, prepare for growth. As the city grows, the number of employees required to serve the public also grows. And we want this building to be built to last and to be flexible enough to accommodate anticipated growth for the next 30-plus years. There'll be more on that later in the presentation. We also want to improve customer service to residents by consolidating services such as public works admin, engineering, and utility billing all under one roof. We plan to centralize high customer service departments such as parks staff into the downtown government campus for a better customer experience. We also want to maximize the taxpayer dollar. Leasing has been a good short-term solution. If we move forward with this project, we will be able to discontinue leasing office space around City Hall. If we don't move forward with the building project, though, we are going to need to lease even more office space. And cost of construction, as you know, will only go up. A plan needs to be put in motion now to take care of space needs for the next 3 decades. Another project goal is to strengthen departmental collaboration. Today, Public Works Admin, Engineering, and Utility Billing are all in different locations, and we would be able to relocate them all to the new building. We'd also be able to strengthen communication and collaboration between Public Works and the Parks Department. And finally, we want to improve employee work environment. Some city employees, frankly, are working in a less than ideal office space today, and we need to provide good quality work areas to attract and retain good quality staff. As you're all aware, staff turnover is very expensive. There are real costs associated with hiring and training new employees. It's important in today's tight labor market to retain good quality employees, and having quality workspace is essential. This graph is showing you how we plan to stay ahead of growth. Here we're showing the population of Sioux Falls as it correlates with the number of city employees needed. And this is based on assumptions of 71 employees per 10,000 residents, and that's what the red line is showing you. As you know, we live in a prosperous, thriving community, and the population continues to increase every year. In fact, in the last 15 years, Sioux Falls grew by an Aberdeen and a Watertown, 50,000 people. You've seen a similar slide to this before, but this is the Dakota Avenue corridor. Just wanted to show you where the building location would be. It would be built on a city-owned surface parking lot north of the 8th and Dakota ramp. And you can see from this aerial view that this building is close to other city and county buildings, and we think it's a great location. It's only a block and a half from City Hall. It's adjacent to a city-owned parking ramp and a city park. And we already own the land, so no land investment is required. The last thing I was going to mention is that downtown signage is an important part of the plan to better service the community and locating important services on our government campus. And we plan to incorporate several signs along the downtown corridor to better direct the public to our services. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Hazard, who's going to discuss the architectural elements of the building.
Thank you, Sue, counselors. I'm Jeff Hazard with Koch Hazard Architects. We're very excited to be involved in helping with this project. We bring to it our recent experience with Raven and Salmons and the Good Samaritan Society National Campus and Sharapa Place, where we've had the opportunity to hone our understanding of the principles of modern office design. The new administrative office building will have its entrance on Dakota Avenue, where a road diet similar to the one on Main Street will add 34 new on-street spaces, providing plenty of convenient customer parking. Adjacent Park will be coordinated with green space around the new administrative building to create an expanded park setting where the public and staff can enjoy the outdoors. The park will include a large oval lawn area surrounded by trees, plantings, and a picnic shelter. And landscaping will be used to screen the existing buildings to the northeast. Next one. The new building is 3 stories plus a basement. Its design is inspired by City Hall, using a similar brick and a comparable vertical organization of windows. Quartzite, our character-defining local building material, is incorporated to help ground the building in its Sioux Falls location. And some larger areas of glass are used to highlight certain important building elements like the entry and lobby, as you see in the middle of this slide, to create a more transparent and approachable building. Inside these glassy areas, we're using wood on the walls to provide a sense of warmth and welcome. Next one. The basement of the building provides space for 39 parking spaces for staff and city vehicles, as well as space for building systems and general storage. A set of staff lockers and some bike storage are there to help promote employee wellness and well-being. On this first floor plan, colors aren't really all that different, but the green represents public areas, kind of in the center at the bottom of the plan, and blue represents staff areas. It's an inherently secure layout. It includes a buffer zone, which is sort of the cross-hatched area between the public and the staff areas. So in other words, there's no way for a member of the public to get into the staff area without going through a couple of doors, which would be secured. The floor also houses, let's see, backing up just a second. The Dakota Avenue entry and lobby welcome the public with a long service counter. It's about the same length as the one in the lower level of City Hall, where building services is housed. There's an informational digital ribbon board above it and ample waiting space. The floor also houses a large multi-purpose room that could be used, for example, for park board meetings or other public functions, as well as a staff break area that's located adjacent to the park. Staff are accommodated in a combination of flexible workstations and offices, all changeable as departments grow and evolve. Facility is designed to optimize working conditions for staff, improving productivity and job satisfaction. Natural light and views are available to all. No workstation is more than 40 feet from a window. Collaboration is enhanced with the open setting, a variety of meeting spaces, intentional circulation patterns, and openness between floors. And lastly on this one, a quick note on access to the relationship between the building and the adjacent parking structure. To access the parking in the basement of this building, one would enter the parking structure at its current entry and then pass through a secure opening into a covered ramp into the to the basement parking area. The roof over that ramp would serve as a convenient way for staff to access the new building from the upper levels of the parking structure. Second floor is much like the first, with green representing public areas and blue staff areas, and then there is a third floor that would be built initially as a shell to be finished in the future when needed. On the north and west sides of the building, we're again using glass as a counterpoint to the brick facade to highlight stairs, the break and collaboration areas. We want to get a lot of natural light into these areas and make them places where staff will enjoy collaboration and exercise and all of that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jerry Fromm from Henry Carlson Company.
Good afternoon. My name is Jerry Fromm. I'm the president of Henry Carlson Company. And on behalf of Henry Carlson Company, I'd first like to thank you and let you know how grateful we are for this opportunity. Over the course of my 15-year career at Henry Carlson Company, the projects I'm always the most passionate about are those that I know will serve the community for decades to come, whether it's a school, a hospital, or a public service building like this one. The main point is that we want to build it right. So ever since we were awarded this opportunity last fall, I've been involved in this project on a daily basis. I can tell you the entire team, the architects, engineers, the folks at City Hall, and our team at Henry Carlson Company has worked hundreds of hours to ensure that we've met the project goals and we've provided a reasonable budget. Some of the goals of the project I believe we have accomplished. We've provided room for growth. As Jeff mentioned, there is a third floor shell space in the current plan and budget. The building is expandable. We've designed the structure to allow a fourth floor to be built should one be needed in the future. That would add a fourth story to the existing building. The building could also be expanded to the north, approximately 5,000 square feet per floor, without any additional land purchase. As Jeff showed you on the floor plans, it's a very flexible layout. The floor plan's very open, and the rooms could very easily be repurposed. We've selected materials that will provide enduring quality. We're proposing a brick facade on the exterior of the building, stone tile in the public spaces, open ceiling plan, and acoustic controls. We've also provided a very energy efficient design. Energy models have and will continue to be tested. Return on investment analysis has been conducted. We've analyzed over 10 different HVAC systems for this building, trying to find the most cost-effective method. We've landed on a geothermal system that provides a 3.5-year payback on the initial investment and will provide very low utility costs over the life of the building. We've incorporated LED lighting throughout the facility to ensure that energy consumption will be low. We're providing high-efficiency wall systems and windows. The second point I'd like to make is that the time is right for this project. Currently, construction materials and labor costs are very stable, but for how long, we don't know. History tells us that inflation will raise the cost of construction over time about 3% annually, and this would only increase the cost to build a facility like this in the future. That 3% inflation could be greater. As you know, the construction industry, like many other industries, is facing some real labor obstacles in the near future as the baby boomers continue to leave the workforce. So the time is right for this project. You've assembled a very qualified team that has put together a plan that meets the goals of the project at a very reasonable budget. I think you'll find that the cost of construction per square foot is very reasonable for a facility of this type. With that said, I think I'll hand things over to Tracy at this point to talk a little bit about the project budget.
Thank you, Jerry. Good afternoon, members of the council. Sue provided at the outset a recap of kind of where we've been, and more importantly, I think why this project is needed and why it's so important. Jeff and Jerry have told us what the project will look like, what's entailed in the project. And in my segment of the presentation, there are a few key remaining points that I will be addressing, namely the overall project budget, how it will be paid for, and of course the very important aspect of affordability of the project. The total project budget that we will be asking the council to approve for this project is $21.9 million. That project budget includes, as you would expect, the final design of the facility, all the architectural and engineering work to bring the project to fruition, as well as the Henry Carlson's work in assisting with that design. The construction of the building itself, of course, is included in the project budget. The improvements to Van Epps Park that were mentioned have also been included in the project budget. You'll recall that last fall there was a considerable amount of discussion about Van Epps Park. Ultimately, the council decided to remove dollars from the capital program for that particular park, waiting and choosing instead to wait for this project to roll forward. And so we have incorporated improvements to Van Epps in this project budget as well. The parking improvements that Jeff mentioned on Dakota Avenue, that Dakota Avenue Road Diet, as we call it, the costs associated with that are included in the project budget, as are the corridor signage elements that Sue referred to. So both the on and off-site signage to further build on that government campus concept that we've been talking about. Those signage costs are included in the project budget as well. Furniture, fixtures, and equipment, of course, any construction project of this nature involves some of that. Furniture, as you would expect, some of the IT networking requirements, electronic switches for the networking system, the badge swipe access to the building, the security elements of that, cameras, that kind of thing are all included, as are interior signage requirements within the building itself are included. And as with any project, we have allocated some dollars, as we have in other larger construction projects, some dollars for legal and administrative costs, as well as an overall project contingency. So that's what the project budget looks like. The project funding, the proposed funding source has not changed from what was originally proposed back in April, as Sue mentioned when we first talked to you about this project. We are proposing that sales tax bonds be sold by competitive sale, by competitive bids. These are, as you know, we have a high bond rating for the city. The city is very solid financially. Our second penny sales tax revenues are very strong, very solid, well-established security for those bonds. And because of that, it's really the kind of financing transaction that lends itself to a competitive bid process. And so I think that is clearly the recommended process to sell the bonds, and will ultimately result in the most favorable interest rates as we go forward. The project is clearly for a governmental purpose, and that's important because then it makes it a project that's eligible for tax-exempt financing, which further improves the interest rate that we would get on the bonds, as opposed to a project that would be required to be financed with taxable bonds. So the bonds will carry tax-exempt interest rates. And as I mentioned to you a couple weeks ago when I was here talking about the overall city debt picture, interest rates are still at very low by historical standards and by recent standards as well. So the interest rate market is very, very favorable at this time. We're proposing a maximum 20-year term on these sales tax bonds. As we move closer to an actual bond sale, we would certainly evaluate opportunities to shorten that by a year or two if possible, but at this point we're recommending a 20-year maximum term to repay those bonds. The use of the bond proceeds really falls into one of these four buckets. Of course, the bond will be sized to fund the project budget of $21.9 million. That's the amount that will go into the construction fund to pay all of those things that were listed in the project budget. As we've done before, and as is typical for a sales tax revenue bond, additional bond proceeds will be put into what's called a debt service reserve fund. Those of you that were with us through the event center financing may be familiar with that. The debt service reserve fund provide an additional security to investors, those bondholders, to provide an additional assurance that the city will never be in a position to where we make a late payment or are unable to make our payments. And so, in effect, by enhancing the security of the bond issue, that again helps to enhance the interest rate that we'll get on bonds. It's important to remember that these debt service reserve funds are not spent on the project. They go into a trust account that are held by a trustee and are invested in earning interest throughout the life of the bonds, and then would be used to make the final bond payment in that 20th year. Bond proceeds would also be used to fund the cost of issuance, so we've talked about that before, as well as capitalized interest fund. The cost of issuance would involve things like the bond rating agency fees, costs to get bonds rated, the underwriter that would purchase and resell the bonds on the market. We've hired a bond counsel and financial advisor. Those fees are all included in the what's called the cost of issuance. And again, those go to a trustee and are dispersed through the trustee. And then we would also fund our initial interest payment. The key point here is that the bond issue would be sized in a way that will raise $21.9 million to fund the project budget. So that's what it will cost. That's what it will, or how we are proposing to fund it. The next few slides I want to use to address the issue of affordability. And some of these slides that you'll see are similar to what I showed you folks a couple of weeks ago, have been updated to contemplate this new bond issue. One measure of affordability that we oftentimes use is a per capita debt, how much debt per person within the population of Sioux Falls, and compare that to other communities. While that's not necessarily certainly would not be the only benchmark we would utilize to make a decision, but it does give you folks, I think, an important benchmark to compare. How do we look compared to some of our peer communities? And the other cities that you see on this slide are many of the same cities that internal audit uses when they do their financial ratio analysis of the city's financial statements. And we oftentimes, in a lot of different ways, compare ourselves with these communities. So you can see the per capita debt for previously issued bonds, those that are currently outstanding in Sioux Falls, is $2,258. And this is information that was updated by our PFM, our financial advisor, last fall. The additional line there, right above that, the first listing for the city of Sioux Falls simply adds to that the amount of the new bond issue. So you can see, obviously, it would increase on a per capita basis. That increase amounts to $124 per capita to a total of $2,382. So you can see we don't change in the ranking relative to these other communities, but obviously we're issuing more bonds, the per capita amount will increase. I think it's important to point out, I know Fargo and Lincoln are communities that we, like I say, in a lot of different ways, quite often will compare ourselves with, and both of those communities are in a position where their per capita debt amounts are about twice what Sioux Falls is. So that I think gives you some measure, some perspective of how we, clearly how we compare with those communities. But again, this is just one measure of affordability. I do want to take a few slides to look through specifically at that source of repayment that we're talking about, the second penny sales tax revenue. So I'm going to walk through a few slides relative to our second penny sales tax. This graphic is a historical picture of the growth of our second penny revenues going back 25 years to 1990, and then through last year, our most recently completed fiscal year, 2015. You can see it's been a long, steady trend of growth over the past 25 years. In 1990, revenues were about $13.6 million. Last year, 25 years later, then those revenues from that second penny sales tax grew to $58.1 million. That's more than a 300% increase over that 25-year period of time. And it really translates to a 6% average annual increase in that revenue source. So that's the kind of thing that really gets bond rating agencies excited. They love to see that kind of long history, that track record of steady, solid growth and that revenue source that's securing those bonds. And this graphic really is a major part of the story behind the city's strong bond rating that we have. Of course, when considering selling bonds, the past is important. That's one of the key sources of information that bond rating agencies look to is historical data. But what really is important, what really matters, is the future. And so we have to consider what might happen in the future. We want to be very cautious not to assume that history will necessarily repeat itself, And so when we look at potentially issuing bonds for a project, we want to take a very conservative approach and stress test the financial affordability aspect as we do that. So this graphic is looking forward 25 years. The previous one looked back 25, but this would look forward 25 years and shows you what the second penny revenues would be if we assume that rather than 6%, they grow at only 3% for the next 25 years. So you can see if we grow at 3% this year over last year, 2016, our revenues would amount to about $60 million from that second penny sales tax. Rolling ahead then 25 years out to 2040, those revenues at 3% annual growth rate would grow to a little over $120 million. So that's kind of the long-term perspective on projecting in a very conservative way how we might expect those revenues to grow. As you folks know, we currently have some bonds that are being repaid with second penny revenues, so some of those dollars in the future are already obligated to pay principal and interest on currently existing bonds. And so I want to show you what that looks like going forward when we assume the 3% annual growth rate. So this is the same 25-year forward-looking revenue chart based on that 3% annual growth in revenue. The principal and interest payments that we have on existing debt is overlaid then in red. So that represents the portion of those dollars each of those years that are obligated to go to pay principal and interest on existing debt. And you can see that it's well below the 2 times coverage, which is the policy that the council set a number of years ago before my time with the city. Very prudently set a policy of not wanting to use more than 50% of those revenues for principal and interest payments on bonds. So you can see we're well below that 50% mark going forward. Another thing I'd point out here, the final payment on our currently outstanding sales tax bonds would occur in 2033. That would be the final payment on the event center bonds, so that at that point all of our currently existing sales tax bonds would be paid off. Now, of course, if we see this revenue source grow in the next 25 years like we have over the past 25 years, the blue bars would extend considerably higher. In fact, by 2040, at a 3% growth rate, as I mentioned, that will grow to a little over $120 million. If history repeats itself at 6% growth for the next 25 years, rather than 120, it would be $250 million. So that gives you a little flavor for how conservative I think we're being in this analysis. And I think this picture goes a long ways toward depicting the manageable level of debt that the city currently has that are being paid from our second penny sales tax revenues. On the next slide, I've updated this one from what I showed you a couple weeks ago to include the estimated principal and interest payments on the new bonds that we're proposing. So this graphic, overall the bars remain unchanged. You can see the total revenue in 2016 would be $60 million with a 3% growth, growing to $120 million by 2040. The red portion, of course, remains the same. Those are the currently outstanding bonds, the principal and interest payments on those. But I've overlaid the little green slice, at least it shows up as green on my computer, but that starting in 2017 and for the next 20 years, then this new bond issue would be overlaid on top of that through 2036. So you can see this new bond would provide a very modest increase in the overall debt service costs that are paid from our second penny revenues. And I think more than anything else that I could show you or that I could say to you, really in a single picture demonstrates and addresses the issue of financial affordability of this particular proposed bond issue. This project clearly is financially affordable for the city of Sioux Falls. So today we've provided the final key pieces of information we've been promising you folks so that you can make a well-informed decision about building this office building project. Today we've shared what the project will look like, the budget that's needed to complete the project. We've shared how it will be paid for. And you've heard many times over the past year and again today about the need and the importance of this project. You folks have been supportive in moving along the path that we've been on, and that path that will soon bring us to an important decision point for you folks next month. The key decision for the council will come before you in the form of a bond ordinance that would provide the financing for this project. So next week, on the 1st of March, the bond ordinance would be placed on first reading. The following week, we anticipate second reading and your decision then on that ordinance. If you do approve the bond ordinance, then that would initiate the next phase of the contracts that we have with our architect and our construction manager. So they would go to work to finalize that design and build a building. And of course, the other thing that would be initiated is the process of carrying out that ordinance and selling the bonds to provide that financing. With that, Sue and I and the rest of the team are be happy to stand by and take any questions you folks have. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you. Let's see. Questions from the council? Councilor Staggers?
Sue, I don't know, maybe you could answer this question. We're building a new administrative building, but then in the process, we're going to be taking employees out of other buildings that we have. How many buildings is that going to be?
Well, what we're considering right now is the Parks Administration building that is at 6th and Phillips. And that building has been a good building, and it still is a good building, but it's not quite right. It would need to be remodeled considerably to make it usable into the future for Parks admin staff. So we're proposing that that building would be vacated and those folks become part of the new building. We are considering keeping it as a city asset and probably repurposing it. As you know, the Levitt Pavilion potentially would be going into that vicinity, as well as potentially an outdoor ice skating rink and other things. So we might choose to use it for concessions and warming house, skate rentals, and other needs for the Levitt Pavilion. So as it stands right now, that's our plan for that building, although we might consider selling it as well. But we have a couple years to decide that. The other building in question is the utility billing building, and that one's out by the event center complex. And it's a smaller building, but we're considering keeping that as a city asset as well. We have found that we have significant storage needs for SMG out at the event center complex. It would potentially could be used for that, and I also kind of had designs on that building. I would like to have another satellite office for facilities maintenance, and those would be the two buildings that we'd be potentially vacating and moving those folks to the new building.
And also, can I ask about the present City Hall? What's going to be happening to it?
Sure. So in the present City Hall, as I said, we've done some significant renovations to ground floor and second floor over the last couple of years. But we did it all with a flexible office concept in mind. And our plan would be if we moved engineering staff off a second floor, and they are on 2/3 probably of second floor right now, potentially they would move to the new building. And then the folks that I mentioned that are still in the basement, those are engineers as well, and they would move to the new building. And then the other area might be Public Works admin. So we'd be able to clear up some significant space within City Hall. And then our plan would be to move those folks back that are in leased space right now. That is the city attorneys, human relations, and community development. So then we wouldn't have to lease that building anymore, and they could move back. Plus, we'd have some room for growth in City Hall for the future.
Thank you.
Councilor Jameson?
Thank you. I've got a, Sue, if you could stay, I think. Okay, a couple of general questions, I suppose. Have you done or considered a poll of the question of whether vacating the current City Hall building is ever an option?
Well, certainly it was a consideration. We chose to instead to invest in the building. There were a lot of things that had kind of been put on the back burner, such as the boilers and the HVAC system, et cetera, that really needed to be updated. And so we chose to invest those dollars into the mechanical systems and the lighting in that building, improve the air quality and so on. So the building has been in existence for now 81 years. It's a good, solid building. It's worked well for city government, and especially now that we've been able to open up a lot of and remove a lot of the drywall, we have been able to maximize the space there. So our thoughts right now is that we have no plans to vacate City Hall. We like it, and it's of historic significance to the community, and we'd like to stay there.
Right, I like it too. The dollar amount, though, that has been kind of spent on it in recent years, what is that number?
It's approximately $5 million, and that would include all of the things that I mentioned before, plus some other additional, but the main ones would be the HVAC system, which was about $1.1 million. We replaced the boilers, we replaced the elevator, we tuck pointed the entire building, but we did that over 4 years because each side is fairly expensive. So that added up to many hundreds of thousands of dollars to go through and put in all new lighting, ballasts, and all of that. And we sprinkled the entire building, so not the whole building was sprinkled before. So those are the primary investments. If you wanted a list, I could certainly provide that.
Not really. The number was what was really important. The other is the parking ramp that's next to the City Hall.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, I guess, I've been an advocate for putting everybody under the same roof for those same collaboration reasons that you had outlined in your presentation. So the question is, have you considered the life expectancy left of the parking ramp that's attached? And what would be the option of removing that, adding our building there so that everybody could still be together, and as well as that other annex building there that's right there? Have you done a cost comparison of tearing all that out, building a new one? What would that be?
We did, and in fact, I'm glad you brought that up. We have invested several hundreds of thousands of dollars in improvements to the City Hall ramp over the last 5 years as well. That was another capital improvement project. I went through and took care of there were some stress fractures, and it was structurally sound, but it needed some repairs. So that was done, I think it was in 2013, I'd have to look that up. But again, we decided that we needed to invest in that structure. We did speak with Coke Hazard initially in terms of just looking at all options for site locations, and we did find that the cost of demoing, and of course it's recently renovated, but that City Hall ramp, and then the cost to build a building in that location, and Henry Carlson and Coke Hazard could speak to this more specifically than I, but because of its location, you wouldn't have the same benefits as you do on the land parcel that we have chosen because of its close proximity to City Hall. The City Hall Annex is another building that we have been investing in. Over the last couple of years, we replaced the HVAC system in that building as well. It was antiquated and didn't provide the fresh air that indoor quality standards demand today. So we have made improvements to that building. We have another significant expense was replacing all of the windows. And we had something like 127 windows in City Hall, and then another, dozens more in City Hall Annex. And all those windows have been replaced now. They're energy efficient. You could feel drafts if you put your hand up even within 2 feet of those windows before. So we believe that the Annex building is a good, solid complement in terms of a building to our downtown campus, and we would like to retain that building as well.
Chair, I could go on with a whole long list of questions, but I'll yield the floor for others.
Thank you. Councilor Karski.
Thank you, Chair. I've heard a lot of generalities, I guess, when it comes to numbers and what we're going to be looking at as far as we're going to save here and save there. But as a business person, and I carry that over to my role as counselor, when I look at a large capital purchase, I want to know, how much are we going to save by not leasing this? It was mentioned we're going to have to lease more in the future. You know, in 4 years from now, how much are we going to be spending on leases then? How much of that money is going to be going back to making this building payment? And are the lease payments, are they coming out of the capital budget or the operations budget? Because those are two separate pools of money. So when I hear generalities, I guess I'd like to see specifics so I can see how much sense this really does make.
Sure, and again, the overall goals of the project are as stated. It's not being driven as a money-saving measure nearly as much as it is meeting the needs of the community going forward. So if you're looking and hinging a decision on, is it going to pencil out a net savings to the city, I think clearly it's not if we have a new building. But certainly, long-term, owning makes far more sense than leasing. I don't think anyone can validate otherwise. The amount of leasing that we do today is relatively small in comparison to the overall square footage that the city has, but it is certainly the tip of an iceberg, I think. And if you look at the just one benchmark you may want to consider in terms of leasing an equal amount of square footage that would be provided within this building, you'd be looking at spending more than $1 million a year on lease payments. And that would, of course, be indefinite. I mean, if you think about what we would have spent as a city since 1935 or whenever City Hall was first built, if we'd have been leasing that, we would have paid many, many times more in lease payments than what I'm sure what the building cost initially. So I guess that's my response at this point. I don't know that I've hit any or all of your questions.
Do lease payments come out of the operating or capital?
Yes, thank you. The lease payments, yes, they do come out of the general fund operating budget. So that's not coming out of the second penny sales tax dollars. So those dollars that we would no longer be utilizing for lease payments would be in the general fund utilized for other purposes. The debt service payments would come from that separate bucket of money that we call our second penny sales tax.
I got one more, Councilor Chair.
Please continue.
And I agree. I mean, if we have the money and we can build long-term, it makes sense. I'm wanting to see, show me the numbers, basically. Show me the money. A couple weeks ago, we talked about what's good debt and what's bad debt for the city. And one of the things you said that a good way to use debt is for buildings, capital purchases. Bad way would be for street repairs. We're including the Main Avenue Diet in the $21 million bond. Why is that part of this when that's kind of a street project? And when I look at $21,900,000, and we're looking at 60,000 square feet, I think is the number of square footage in this building, correct me if I'm wrong, that's $365 a square foot. So I know that we have FF&E in there, but when we look at building a building or cost to construct, can we drill down into that number a little bit?
A couple things. One, I believe, and the rest of the project team can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the total square footage is 79,000 square feet. So that would bring that, if you were doing the math, bring that per square foot cost down to somewhere around, Jerry, 277 total. In relation to the road diet, the street improvements, a couple of thoughts there. One is, I know there have been times in the past where projects maybe result in other costs somewhere else, and we wanted to be as comprehensive as we can and capture all of the impacts of this project, including that. But with that said, the road diet costs are really very, very minor. I think it's less than $100,000, but it's part of this project, and I think it should be because it's being done to capture the additional parking in front of the building so the public can have good access to parking. If you were going to build an off-street parking lot to serve a project, you would certainly make that part of the project, and that's the motivation on the road diet, is to capture that parking.
Yeah. Again, I have others, but I'll yield the floor.
Okay. Councilor Rolfing?
Yes, Sue, I think I need Sue. Sue, safety is going to be real important down there on the parking, or on the, well, both the parking ramp and the building itself. I understand that we're going to put cameras for safety on the outside of the building that will, I assume then that they will be able to look over at the library that'll be right across the street. So in case something would happen there, there'd be, and then basically completely around the building. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yes, we are definitely planning to include cameras, surveillance cameras. We'll work with our vendor on those particulars in terms of the positioning of each one. But yes, our intent is to have cameras both inside and outside of the building, as well as we'll have badge swipe access to all the employee entrances and to many of the interior doors.
Okay, super. And then if I could get Jeff, one thing. Jeff, you mentioned something about covered entrance or covered access from the parking ramp to the south to the building, but it would come through the garage. Is that what you're saying?
I did say that, yes.
So the people
So
would,
you'd enter the garage, the existing parking structure the same way you do now.
right?
And you'd make a little bit of a left turn and then go through a garage door, and then there'd be a ramp down to the basement of the.
Okay, but what about the people that would be parking in the ramp? Will they have a
There'd
way,
be no change for them.
they'd come in the front door?
They would come in the same, the people that would be parking in the current parking structure would really notice very little, if any, change.
Okay, there won't be
Circulation.
a ramp or a skyway or something go across to the building itself?
Oh, okay. There had been some discussion about having an enclosed skyway, but because we're covering the ramp down to the basement for a variety of reasons, including, keeping the ice off of it, we have a convenient way for people to get from the second level of the parking structure right across into the second level of the new administrative office building. So we're not enclosing that. We're not building a glass enclosure. It's just, we ended up putting the building quite close to the parking structure in order to leave more space to the north for landscaping, for the park extension, and for potential future expansion. So there really is not a lot of space between the parking structure and the new building. So it's just a quick walk across the it'd be a paved roof area to the entrance, to the administrative building.
Okay, understand. Those were my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Erpenbach?
I had my questions answered. Thank you.
All right. Councilor Erickson?
Thank you. I have a few have been answered, so thank you for that. I guess I'll ask Tracy. I guess I'll start with Tracy. Will we be paying the principal and interest, or are these just interest-only payments as we start for the debt services?
The first principal payment would be made next year. So, and that's typical. The year after you borrow the money, you'd begin making your principal payments.
Principal and interest on it. It's not
Principal
just,
and interest. Yeah,
okay.
right. Yeah, we've got to pay the interest. Yep.
Did we do the same for the event center, or was that just starting out as interest only?
No, there were no interest-only payments, except in the year of, the year the bonds are sold. There's a period of time between the day the bonds are sold and your interest payments are due May 15th and November 15th. So, for example, if we sell bonds this year on, let's say, July 1st, there will be interest accumulating from July 1st to November 15th. And that would be the only payment that does not include principal. But going forward then, beginning in 17, there would be principal payments, and that's exactly the way the event center bonds were done.
Same thing. Okay. And then can you, on the breakout of the improvements, I don't know if that's you or Sue, I know we were given the $21.9 million, and I have asked for that to be broken out as far as what is the actual building, what is, each of these are line itemed out, but there's not a cost. So what are we paying for Van Epps? What are we paying for on-street parking improvements? That sounded about $100,000, I know you said. et cetera, down the list, just to kind of piece it out to know where each pot of money is going.
Right, and if this project is approved and we do move forward, we would provide that breakdown each time we provide you with an update, just as we have on other projects. So they might be grouped or categorized a little bit differently than what you've just asked for. But I can give you a kind of a thumbnail breakdown right now of that 21.9 million. 18.4 would be for construction, and that would include all the construction to be done, including several of the items you mentioned, the building itself, the park improvements, and so forth. Professional fees, and that would be primarily design, is about 1.1 million. The FF&E is a little under $900,000, and the rest is primarily contingency funds, about 1.4 million in contingency.
So if we were to break apart the building construction and Van Epps, what would Van Epps be? What portion would Van Epps be?
I believe Van Epps, the construction costs for that are something less than $300,000.
Because I know originally we had in our CIP, we had, I think, 471,000, so I'm not sure.
For construction only, yeah, right.
For Van Epps, it was 85,000 for design in 2016, and 2017 to 2020 was 471, so that's gone down
It was,
significantly
I think, a total of
then.
550 something. Mhm.
Right, okay, awesome. And then we've heard a lot about building for growth in talking about that. I know we've been talking about this project for some time, and I was under the impression that we would be selling or getting rid of or purging some of the additional properties that we have. That was, I think, one of the selling points in the beginning was that, and I understand needs change, we might repurpose, whatever, I get it. But if we're talking about building for growth, how long will this last us until we need the third floor, and what will the cost be of the third floor?
The cost of the third floor, I guess, I'm not sure I can answer that. Maybe somebody else on the project team can provide an estimate on that. I think Sue addressed in terms of the amount of growth or the time into the future that we're planning for. And, you know, I mean, it's difficult to say. Is Sioux Falls going to continue to grow at the same pace? Is it going to slow down? Is it going to go faster? So I think the overall intention, the number that we've been kind of working around is planning for growth for the next 30 years. Right. Certainly with the opportunity to add a fourth floor, that would extend that even further. So I think it's safe to say that the plan as it is and the expandability of the building that's being proposed, not only adding a floor, but as Jerry mentioned, expanding to the north as well. Gosh, it's going to set the city up for office space for many, many decades, in my view.
Right.
And I don't know if anybody else on the team wants to add to that or not. But
I just have one small follow-up for Jerry, if you don't mind. Jerry, we talked about the cost of square footage, 79,000 square feet and $277 per square foot. How does that compare to other projects you've done? What does that look like? I mean, I know a little bit about construction, but not near what I hope to. So
Sure.
I'm curious what that looks like for other things
I would say
you do.
the 18.4 that Tracy mentioned as cost of construction equates to about $233 per square foot. And I would say that that's a very average cost for an office building. Considering the parking ramp below, the shelf space on third floor, and the location of the site. The structure on an office building always can vary based on soil conditions of the building, where you're building at the site that you're at. So from that perspective, I would say 233 falls right in the middle. We're certainly not building an extravagant building here. Very reasonable, very prudent finishes. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Councilor Kiley.
Thank you. Been taking a lot of notes here as we've been going, and I would thank Councilor Erickson for that question. 233 square feet, and I would just want to confirm that that's for the actual office building portion of the project, not including the other improvements to the park, which is correct. We originally had up to or close to $500,000 budgeted that we removed for this. Jerry?
Yeah, that $233 per square foot does include Van Epps Park and some of the improvements that we'd be doing along the street and sidewalk on Dakota Avenue.
If we were to separate the Van Epps Park and looked at the building only,
I think it would reduce about $5 a square foot, so you'd be in that $228 a square foot range.
okay, thank you very much. And as you stated, this is very average for other projects that are taking place. This is, I guess, the remainder, or if you would like to address that, please.
Council members, my name is Nate Pearson with the Tegra Group. I'm your owner's rep for the project. The questions about kind of the all-in cost of $21.9 million, how does that judge against other projects we have seen? You're at $277 a square foot all in, including FF&E and some design fees. Tegra is currently part of 3 office buildings like this, another one actually in South Dakota, and that is very typical. You're looking for about $300 to $350 a square foot on an all-in office building like this.
300 to 350 per square feet?
That's what we are seeing currently.
We're looking at 238 for the building on this.
277 all in.
7 for the whole
I'm
project.
all in total project, yeah.
Including Park, Van Epps, or
Yes.
not, or the Dakota Avenue and so forth, the road diet.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so over the past couple of months, as we've been talking design and construction and in the meetings, we're feeling very good about this budget.
So I think Jerry had mentioned that it was really kind of average, so would actually be below average with what you just stated.
Yeah, in my opinion, on the
projects.
overall, the difference being you already own the land. So that
Correct.
350 I'm mentioning,
Okay.
that's a land purchase usually in
Very
some
good.
other projects. Yeah. Yep.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much, Nate. And if I could, this is something that has been ongoing, and a lot of this, obviously, I'm in support of this project. I have invested an awful lot of time, as well as other counselors in this project too. But I know that we've been working on this extensively since April. And actually, the space needs in 2007, space needs study conducted in 2007, 2012, identified our needs going forward, and we're now we're at that point. And I just like to emphasize the prepare for growth aspect of it. And Sue had mentioned it that since 2000, we've grown by over 50,000 people in the city of Sioux Falls. And again, that is the equivalent of adding Aberdeen, South Dakota, and Watertown, South Dakota, to our city in the past 15 years. So that is an example of how fast we are growing. We're actually growing in excess of a Canton, South Dakota, every single year. And so with that, we have responsibilities to our citizens to continue to provide them with the services that they should expect. And I'd like to, so it's kind of a pay me now or pay me later scenario. If we don't build now, it's just going to increase the cost of the construction, and we're going to continue to pay more in lease money, which we will never, ever get back. And at 3% increase yearly in construction costs, if we wait just 1 year, that's over $657,000 in additional dollars that we would have to invest. On year 2, that escalates up to $1.35 million just in a 2-year period. And that continues to compound year after year after year. So I really do believe that now is the time to do this, and we need to plan ahead in order to make the commitment to our citizens that we are making currently. We will, every 5 years, expand at a rate of 110 to 120 employees based on the graph that was shown to us earlier here. So every 5 years, 110 to 120 employees. We need space to put them, obviously. Current City Hall, we're bursting at the seams the way it is. If we don't do this, we're going to have to lease additional buildings or space at additional cost, and I would imagine that lease costs are only going to escalate as well, too. We can't expect for it to remain the same. And again, Van Epps was removed from our budget earlier. That was mentioned, so I'll just kind of briefly go on. The Dakota Avenue Road Diet, that's a great project to do, even if we're not building a building. But it's this is really the time to move forward, and it's something that I think our citizens deserve, as well as our staff too. I mean, we want to treat the staff well. We want to provide them with an environment that enables them to perform at the top of their abilities to provide those services to our citizens.
Councilor Rolfing.
Yeah, just a couple extra things. Councilor Jameson, I was with you on, as Sue knows, I've had him do a significant amount of work on that, tearing down that parking ramp and having a campus that was one building basically that people could walk back and forth. But I've been convinced that it would not be cost effective to do that, and so I went with that, with what the experts are telling me. Secondly, I also was thinking ahead from the standpoint of saying, well, we're building the foundation to put 4 floors, the 4th floor on if we need to. Why not a 5th and why not a 6th? And I don't know if Jeff can explain the real simply why we can't, but there was some significant reasons that because of fire and different things like that the 5th floor becomes very, very expensive compared to the other ones. And so 3 floors is about as far as we can, or 4 floors is as far as we can go up in this situation without incurring continued expense. And then by moving that building, as Jeff said, we do have room to expand on the north of it to go that way too if we need to 30 years from now. So just wanted to highlight that, or not highlight that, let people know that some of us have been thinking other ways too, and we've done the studying, and it's a good project.
Councilor Erpenbach.
Thank you. The question that I get the most from people about this is about why it's needed, and the sales pitch we keep getting it. And don't get me wrong, I love our city staff. You people do amazing things, but what I hear more and more from folks is that they don't want to see city government grow. I can't believe those words are coming out of my mouth, but our citizens are looking for smaller government. And so for me to say to those folks, well, it's because we're going to hire all these people, we need a place for them, is really not a great sales pitch for me. And so what I have been talking about is that those leased properties that we have. And I know that we are no longer leasing some properties because we did reconfigure City Hall, and that has been a savings already. And so what I really want, I know we've talked about generalities, and Councilor Karski kind of led us down that road, and we got kind of a start. I really do want to see numbers. I want to see numbers either from our staff, Dave Bixler, or from finance staff in the administration office. I want to talk about specific savings in not only that building that on Dakota Avenue now, the one where the attorneys and those folks are. I want to know how much we would spend there over the period of time. I want to know how much we would save now. And I really want to guess on payments. I want to be able to when I talk to people, if I tell them we're doing all this renting now, it suddenly does make sense. Even those smaller government folks are like, well, that's stupid. So let's not do that. But I really need real numbers so that I can talk to people about that. So that would be my request before first reading, is that we're able to look at those numbers and say, this is how much we're spending now. This is how much we could pay over a period of time. And then what's our savings when we do this kind of thing? And I know, Tracy, that it's not all about the money. It really isn't, because we do have to provide the kinds of services that people expect. But for some folks, it does come down to the money, and it's an easy sales pitch when we say, it's either this or rent a bunch of stuff. So I'd appreciate that, but thank you.
Councilor Jameson.
Thank you. A couple items, if I could also request from Sue. You had made a comment that you had visited a lot of different buildings within the downtown area and kind of made an assessment that our best options were to build. I'd really like a summary of that, because there are buildings downtown that could be available. We don't know. Things change every day. People merge, people sell. I think there's new opportunities probably every day, but I'd like a summary of that report. And then as well with some of the other numbers, the value, assessed value or the appraised value of the parks building and that utility building, even though you may have a purpose for them, I think like it has been stated, others are probably looking for more consolidation, cost savings in the end, what the difference might be. If we're vacating those buildings, let's sell it. You know, we have the old Parks rec building still kind of sitting out there. If there's ways to generate revenue that we could offset the cost of lowering the borrowing number, I think that's what we should consider. The other is the lease agreement that we have currently. I suppose, I'm speculating, but I'm assuming that that probably has some terms involved that make it conducive for you to build now versus later. Otherwise, you'll have to renew a lease or something. But it'd be important for us to know what those terms are, just so we don't feel so maybe pressured into this. Maybe there's a reason the timeline is now is because those leases are going to run out and you don't want to renew a lease. That makes sense to us, but it'd be good to know what those terms are. Let's see. It would also be, I think, a good idea to know what the appraised value of City Hall is. City Hall and this building at Carnegie Hall and the annex. All those dollars you've spent on the buildings are worthwhile investments. Most buildings that you've invested money like that always retain that value generally. And I think it's a good number for us to know if we were to consider building a brand new City Hall with everything we need, a secure entryway, the council and the administration together in one building, those collaborations that you talk about, I think could be tremendous on a whole new front. Well, what would that cost? I mean, we should know that as an option. You might know it. I think we should know it. So we can make this decision of borrowing $18 or $21 million to kind of give us a 30-year fix. What about the future after that? And if this is a phased approach, I'm just thinking out loud here, but let's imagine you bought all the land to the west of this, and all of a sudden, thank you, and all of a sudden we've got a location for a brand new City Hall in a phased-in approach with this first building added into the next building in 20 years. Things like that. That all of a sudden starts to make me feel more comfortable with a long-term plan that says we're going to put everybody together, connect everybody, and we're going to save money along the way because we can sell off some of those other pieces. And look, actually, the net isn't that much. But the improvements to the city are tremendous. Convenience to the customer, the collaboration building between departments, collaboration between the council and the administration. All those things start to add a value to this whole move. And I would really like some of that information for me as a counselor to make the best decision here. It's probably a lot, but this is a big deal, and I'd just like as much information as I can. So thank you.
Great conversation. Any other questions from council members? I have one, Tracy. Earlier in the presentation, we talked about a 20-year bond or less. Mm-hmm. How could it be less?
Well, the term will be set when the bonds are sold, and certainly if the market for municipal bonds changes on a daily basis, interest rates go up and down. So if rates are very favorable, say in a couple months, if we're ready to sell bonds and rates have gone down and we can make larger, essentially keep the payments the same but have them run out a year sooner, that would be the kind of thing I'm talking about in terms of making a decision to shave a year or maybe 2 years off. I certainly don't want to indicate that's a promise of any sort, but from my perspective, if we can shorten it up, that's just that much better, makes it that much more attractive. But I think we should go into it with eyes open, that with the expectation that it would be a 20-year bond. If there's an opportunity to shorten it up, I think we should certainly take that. But
okay, thank you. And then Sue or maybe Mark Cotter could talk to our issue about our regular city hall, how many employees we have there, and especially the employees that are in the basement. I think a lot of people think the basement is the permitting office and the planning down there, but there's actually well, I call it the hole.
Well, or some people call it the dungeon or the swamp, or, yeah, there's a lot of different terms that are used. There is an actual basement level of City Hall. City Hall actually has 5 levels to it. And so I believe we have 8 engineers, Mark, in the basement level of City Hall. And in terms of the number of employees at City Hall right now, I'd estimate it's somewhere around 160 to 165 employees, and we'd be moving many of those folks out of City Hall to free up space for the other departments to move back.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Once again, any other questions from our council? Councilor Erickson?
I'm sorry, Sue. Don't sit down. Do you have the number for what we pay in lease payments for the one building that we lease? What do we pay a month for that?
It's approximately $10,000 a month, so $120,000 a year. It does go up incrementally. I think the first 2 years we're at a base rate, and then each year they're going up incrementally after that. I believe I'll have to double check, but I think we have a 3-year lease with an option to extend twice by 1 additional year, so I think we're covered through 2018, or the spring of 2018, if we choose to continue to stay there.
Okay. And then I know there was a lot of other information here requested from many different counselors today. This is a big decision. I mean, this is a really, I mean, we're talking about a big decision, and you know, if you do the equation of what we are spending, it maybe comes out to a couple percentages and doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal in the big scheme of things, but it is a big deal. And certainly we have to answer to our constituents as far as why we are or are not approving. You fill in the blank. So I'd ask that you and whoever was asked the questions, if we could get those to us right away. I know the reading is next Tuesday, and we do not have a lot of time to review that information. So I'd ask that we get that information right away, or potentially look at delaying it a week so we can review that information to make sure that we're making the best decision possible with what we have.
I understand. And yes, I do have a list ready. As we were going through over the 3-year period and vetting through various options for possible lease or purchase, I can certainly provide that list to you as early as tomorrow. And we'll work on the other items that were requested. In terms of appraised value, we'll need to work with the real estate team to see if we have those numbers readily available, or if not, if we can obtain them quickly for you.
Thank you.
Councilor Erpenbach?
I just, Councilor Erickson's right. I'm not comfortable with having second reading so close. So when we get to that point, I'd like council to think about delaying it at least another week in between. I mean, we can certainly do first reading March 1st, but you know, we're going to have all this material that we've all asked for, lots of things tonight. You know, that March 1st, I hate to tell you, it's just next week, so that's not very far away, as much as we don't want our lives to speed by, but March 8th is just not enough time, I don't think. That would be my opinion, so.
Councilor Kiley?
I just want to ask Sue for clarification. $10,000 for lease payments, was that a monthly payment, yearly payment? Could you repeat that, please?
It's a monthly payment.
Monthly payment.
And it's 120, round figures, 120,000. It's slightly less than that, but round figures, 120,000 annually.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Erickson's right. Is utilities included in that? Utilities in that, Sue? Sorry.
Yes, that includes everything. That's the lease and triple net.
Everything.
Okay. The incredibly slow elevator. I think we pay extra for that.
Providing it doesn't go up, and providing you don't need additional lease space.
Okay, any other questions? Any other subjects as we move forward? Seeing none, this meeting is now adjourned.